sorry about the delay, everybody. We've just got a couple of people that are just in the middle of logging in, so we're just trying to help them get audio on their system. So we'll just wait a couple of moments just so everybody can hear us. I'll start the demonstration in about 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, everybody, so today what I'm going to talk you through is the Bed and ISA process guidance. This is actually stored on the intrinsic extranet system, and I will show you how to find that and where you find all of the documents. But first of all, I'll just take you through some guidance just to help you when you're doing your Bed and ISA process. Now this will just cover off, there's 2 main ways that you can do the Bed and ISA process. You can either do it on a full process, or a shortened process. So I'm just going to quickly cover off both of those areas for you and which one would apply to your particular case. So this just gives you an idea of the things we're going to cover today. So we'll just go through the workbench requirements, the ATR, fund assumptions, so when you know how it's a shorter process or if it's the long full submission process, which suitability report to complete, how to document about the future tax years, and what documentation and calculators you're required to upload into Officeweb. Okay, so if you set up a platform account and the client holds both an ISA and a collective account, you can take an instruction from your client to act on their behalf to transfer the annual allowance into the ISA at the start of the new tax year. Now, some platforms allow this to be done automatically through automatic ISA wrapping, or you may need to do it manually. So this is what we're going to cover off today, is the manual side of that. In either circumstance, you must have a client service agreement in place to be able to use the process described. So what I'm going to go through now would require that you've already discussed this with the client, that you're going to be completing a Bed and ISA process with them each year, so you don't need to go through the full sales process every time you see them. Okay, so the type of business that's considered a replacement is where units are being encashed and new units are being purchased. So as this is a Bed and ISA and you're only going to encash the number of units to top up the ISA allowance, we do not require you to send this for pre-approval. So you can complete this and submit the case without getting any prior pre-approval. Now, this is just a guide which is obviously aided to help you move the money across as quickly as possible in an efficient way, so that you've got the least amount of paperwork to complete and the least amount of system fact finds that you need to put through. But again, you just need to make sure that you do fulfill some of the assumptions before you can follow this specific process for it. Now, once you've documented to the client that you intend to repeat the Bed and ISA process each year, you don't have any further requirement to complete a full submission in future years. So you would just confirm this year on year as part of the client review. And we would need to see that documented just for our proof that that's obviously been discussed with the client. Okay, so moving on to the workbench system. What I'm going to do now is just sort of cover off what you need to add into Workbench, and this would be for the full submission side. So it is essential, obviously, that you record sufficient information about the existing plans which the transfer is being made from. So if the money is coming from an existing OIC, you would need to include the information about the existing plan and obviously how much you're going to be reviewing. So as it's the new tax year, we're going to look at 11,880. You will be able to do this again, though, following the 1st of July, and you can do this by the further top-up of 3,120, so the same process will apply from the 1st of July. So you would need to complete an investment need financial planning case on Workbench, and I'll just run through sort of the different slides that are most important for you that you'll come across. Now, I know you've probably seen these several times before. So when you go to the financial planning workbench, fact find, you'll come to the scope wheel. So as you can see, you've got 8 different areas that you can review in the financial planning fact find. With regards to ISA allowance and bed in ISA, you would only need to have the investment section ticked. All of the others you can leave crossed. As you're aware, if you were to cross any of the sections, you just need to put a little description in the yellow box here just to explain why you're not looking to review that today. Once you've completed the scope wheel to what you're going to discuss, you would then just click on fact find and it'll take you on to the next page for that. Now, I'm not going to go through the full fact find with you because I know you've obviously know how to complete a fact find, but I'm just going to show you some of the most important areas that do apply to the bed and ISA process. So, as you can see here on the left-hand side, we're on the property and other assets section. So you would click under here where it says, does the client have any assets? So in this case, we're going to say yes. And complete the property details. So the client has a property worth $300,000 and it is their main residence. Again, if you have any other assets, you would just highlight these in this section here and they would come up sort of underneath the property. So if you've got any buy-to-let, for example, so you would have those all noted on this page here. And what you would need to do is just make any notes for any assets that have been sold in this tax year. And the reason for that is we do need to do a calculation just to show that there's no CGT liability when you're doing the bed and ISA encashment. Okay, so you just put any notes in there. And then just moving forward to the next section, which is savings and investment details. This is where you would put all of the details of the existing ISA and the existing OIC, which is where you're going to be taking the transfer from. So in this case, we've got 2 Aegon policies. The ISA currently has 5,000 in it, and the OIC has 55,000. You can add further assets just by clicking on the plus box here in the right-hand corner. And this just completes all of the mandatory sections here. So as you can see, the mandatory sections do have a red asterisk next to them. So you would complete those as described. However, in the case of bed and ISA, there is some other areas that are mandatory that although it will let you pass without completing them, we do require them to be filled in. So you would need to put in the provider that the transfer is coming from, the policy number if you have that, and the initial investment amount. So in this case, it's valued at 55, but the initial investment was 50. You also need to put in when the commencement date of that was, so we can see what the growth has been on the investment with the investment that we're reviewing, and whether or not there's been any regular savings to this. Okay. So like I say, they are mandatory areas, although on the standard fact find they're not marked as mandatory, and we do require them to be completed for the bed and ISA process. Okay, so just moving on then, if you're still on the savings and investment details page, it'll just sort of bring you down a little bit further. You would just complete the details as you normally would. So the objective of the money, give a bit of a further description about that. And will this form part of the estate on first death? So it would be yes. So like I say, in that details section, that's what transfers across into the suitability letter. So what you may want to put in there is something like client is looking to move their money to a more tax efficient environment. Okay, so once you've completed that screen, like I say, it'll just take you through a few more sections. I'll just go past those for the moment because they're not important on this case. Just to show you the screens that are relevant. Once you get to the needs analysis section and you're under investment needs analysis, as you can see on the top, it will have the investments that you've logged previously. So we've got here one of the accounts that we're looking at, which is in this case a £56,000 OIC through Wensleydale, and the review amount here is stating 11,520. Now, before you come onto this section, it will show that review amount is 0. So you need to go to the arrow on the top right-hand corner. It'll be facing down at this point, and just extend the box open, and then you would just complete in the review amount section the amount that you're looking to review. So this is obviously showing as 11,520, and for this tax year it would be 11,880. That will automatically default as 0, so it will allow you to pass. Although you've not completed it, the system will assume something's been put in there because it will be shown as 0. But obviously when you get to the next section, it will show that you're looking to review 0. So you do need to complete that with the amount that you're doing the Better Nicer for. Now if you're doing it over across tax years, you might have two, you might have the previous tax year and the new tax year. So it may be more than the 11,880, depending obviously on when you're doing the Better Nicer. Now just moving down from there, once you've completed the review amount to 11,880, you'll just follow down the page, and then you've got another section here which states, does the client require further advice on reviewing the underlying funds within their existing arrangements to ensure they still meet their needs and current attitude to risk? So what you're basically saying is that the client wants a full review on that OIC, they want to review their attitude to risk and possibly look at a fund switch. Well, in this case, that would be no, because we're not doing anything other than the Better Nicer. And then the next question is, does the client wish to receive further advice about reinvesting monies from their existing investments? So that would always be yes, because with the Better Nicer, it is classed as a replacement. Okay, so just moving on to the next section. The next question is, are there any potential penalties on any of the investments being considered for reinvestment? Now the answer to that will always be yes, although you may be certain that there's definitely no CGT liability, and if they've had no other gains in that tax year, you would still click yes to that, and in the details section you would just put possibly a CGT liability if other investments have been encashed. The reason for that is it transfers that over to the suitability letter, and it just puts a mandatory statement in there for you, so it covers that off for you automatically. So you would just complete the rest of the sections as you normally would. And again, you would explain the objective for the investments, which is always going to be tax efficiency and growth if you're doing a lump sum, and the purpose of this. So again, that you want to save the money in a more tax efficient environment. So that will all transfer across to the suitability letter. Now, if you remember going back to the scope wheel, there's 8 different sections on the scope wheel, and we've only clicked on investments. So under the priorities and actions page, it's just going to show up investments, whereas if we clicked on a couple of other options like savings or retirement planning, you might have 3 or 4 different priorities here, and what you would do is just put those in order. In this case, so we've only clicked on the one, so our main priority is going to be investments, and that's the only one that's going to apply. So you would just put a brief description in here as to why investments are the most important thing for the client. Now, as it's a Better Nicer, they just want to do their standard ISA allowance to maximise the tax efficiency for this tax year. Complete this section under here, so just to confirm the monthly disposable income is correct, whether or not they're adding on a monthly basis, and what the lump sum is. So in this case, it would be 11,520 or 11,880. Okay, so that's the main sections of the fact find completed. This is if you haven't already discussed with the client in previous reviews that you're going to be doing an automatic Better Nicer. That would be the full process that you would follow. So you would do a full workbench and also an ATR as well. So I'll just confirm about the attitude to risk requirements. If the attitude to risk has been discussed and confirmed within the last 12 months, and the client agrees that their ATR for this objective hasn't changed, then you can use the previous profiler. Now, in some cases, that will just be the standard intrinsic ATR, or for PS advisors, it'll be the previous MRTQ. Now, the funds currently held can be used to support the recommendation. So, like you say, if they've confirmed that nothing's changed, their objective for the money is the same, we're happy that you can use the previous profiler, whether that's through PS or intrinsic. But you would need to upload a copy of the profiler within the documents section in Officeweb, and we'll cover that off with you in a few minutes. Now, if you've had no discussion with the client about the ATR within the last 12 months, and the client now wants to change their ATR or review the funds, then the ATR profiler must be used and completed as new, and previous ATRs will no longer apply. So in this instance, the recommendation must be supported with the appropriate fund research, full explanations and a full suitability report. So basically, if you've not seen them in the last 12 months, if you've not done an ATR, you're going to have to do a full sales process. Now just moving on to the fund assumptions. So if there's been no review of objectives or an ATR discussion at this meeting, then the new ISA can be invested in the same funds in the same proportion as those disinvested from the OIC. So there must be a commitment to review them at the next servicing meeting. Within the suitability report, this will obviously explain that. So we've got some standard wording that we'd recommend that you use. So for example, you can put, we discussed fund selection at our previous meeting, and you confirm that you are happy to maintain your investment in the same proportion, and we'll review your attitude to risk and fund selection at our next servicing meeting, and if you wish to review this, please contact me. Again, include all dates just to confirm that they're fall within the right timescales. Now, if there's been a discussion about ATR and fund selection at this meeting, then the new ISA will be invested according to the new recommendation. So if the attitude to risk has changed and new funds have been recommended, then for whole of market cases, you'll need to do full de facto research. If it's a provider that you've chosen off the panel, off the intrinsic matrix, then additional fund research is not required. You can confirm if the funds remaining in the OIC will change or stay the same, but again, you need to include these in any tax calculations. So just bringing you on to this section now that outlines the quote. So you've probably seen this page a few times. So again, this is just to design a solution. You would just complete the mandatory fields, which are the client's name, the amount, the investment, which is going to be a lump sum investment. Are you applying for this product? So you'll always click yes for that because we're obviously applying for the product. And under the section replacements recommended, again, that would be yes because this is classed as a replacement. And then following on from that, you would click on the suitability report on the following page, and that will then transfer everything across that you've completed in the workbench and any of the additional details that you've put in for any free typing, that will go across into the suitability report as well. So this would be the full suitability report if you've done the full sales submission for the bed and ISA. If you've done a shortened bed and ISA process, you're not required to do the report writer suitability report. You would just be required to do the shortened bed and ISA suitability letter, which is about 4 pages long, and I'll show you where that is in a second. So just to confirm which report you would use, if the bed and ISA case satisfies a number of assumptions, you can use a simplified template report, which you can find on the document store, and I'll show you where that is in a second. However, if the bed and ISA case includes a change of funds or an investment strategy, then a full workbench report writer suitability report is required. Now, just to give you a bit of information about the simplified report, in order to be able to use this report, there's a few assumptions that you need to follow. So the client must have a platform account. The original advice must be given by the same advisor, so it can't be following a transfer of servicing. The advisor must also have been part of Intrinsic or the PS network at the time that the original advice was given. There's no material changes to the client's personal circumstances. The client's investment objective and ATR profile for this objective have not changed, and they have been completed within the last 12 months. The client's investment strategy hasn't changed, and the client does not wish to make any changes to their current strategy or funds. The new ISA will be in the same funds in the same proportion as those being encashed, and the client has not used their ISA allowance for the current tax year. You must make sure that there's a servicing agreement in place and that there's no CGT liability. So again, I'll show you where the CGT calculator is. That is something that is mandatory, and you do need to give this add this to the file through documents on the Officeweb system, just to show the compliance team that you have done the calculation for CGT, although in most cases it's not likely that you'd have a CGT liability. What you also need to include in the report as well is to confirm that this is a replacement. So if you just remember back to the Workbench system, if you are going to use the report writer, which is the automated template report, by clicking on is this replacement and we chose yes, this will automatically transfer this section across, so you don't need to worry about free typing it. And again, on the Bed and ISA template letter, the shortened version also does include this as well. So you just need to confirm this is definitely in whichever letter you've used. So it just explains that having your money in an ISA will allow you to benefit from the preferential tax treatment of ISAs. This will remove your need to complete a tax return in future years and will use all or part of your ISA allowance this tax year. Now again, just to cover off some more about the suitability report, a full explanation of any tax consequences of the encashment do need to be included. So that would be shown within the tax calculation, and then it just gives you a bit of word in there that you would include. Okay. Now, like I said, it is unlikely that you're going to have a CGT liability. If the client is to suffer a CGT liability at either 18 or 28%, just purely for the benefit of topping up an ISA, you would need to have a very good justification as to why you're recommending it over just waiting until the next tax year. Okay, so again, we'll go through the calculation in a second. This just gives you an example, obviously, of how to calculate capital gains tax, which I'm sure you're all aware of. So just to cover off future tax years, where you agree to act on your client's behalf, you must ensure that this is documented in the suitability report, and this just gives you some additional wording. So like I say, this would be automated in the template, but it's something that you should include in your review documents as well. And where you fully documented this position in your original suitability letter, there's no requirement to re-document the advice again in the next tax year when you're doing an automatic Bed and ISA process. However, you should reconfirm that the transaction has taken place at the next client review in a summary letter. So I would just confirm the dates that you put this through. Okay. You must have a servicing agreement in place with your client before you carry out any type of Bed and ISA arrangement. This is a mandatory, so you need to have this on file. And where you've not documented that the transfer will take place in your previous report, you are required to complete a full advice process. So even though you've seen the client within the last 12 months and are just purely wanting to do the top-up, as you've not already documented, you would be required to do the full advice process because we do need that as a mandatory. So just to give you a breakdown of the shortened Bed and ISA letter, like I say, it's about 4 pages long. So as you can see, everything in red is what you would manually amend. So you would just complete the client's name, address, date, the date of the last review, so when you've confirmed that the Bed and ISA would be in place. So again, you can also manually amend these to make it more personal to the client. Confirm about attitude to risk and how that hasn't changed, and when the original attitude to risk was completed. You would just confirm your fund selection, obviously fund recommendations, which will just be the same as the existing funds. And here it just tells you about policy transfers, about the advantages, the disadvantages, and the costs involved in doing the Bed and ISA. And any tax considerations as well. So like I said, it will tell you about if you've got a CGT liability, so you'll copy that in there. It's very rare that you would. However, if you did have a CGT liability, you would need to expand on that as to the reasons why you're doing the ISA top-up. It would cover off all of your charges as well, and there are areas here that you might just remove if they're not relevant to your case. Now, you must, although you'll have a servicing agreement in place, you might also have like a fee agreement, and you will need to clarify this once again in the letter. So this does need to correlate with what you've already got in place on the document store. And then just complete it with your, obviously, name and details, and that's the suitability report complete for the shortened process. So it's a lot quicker than doing the full report writer version. You would need to then manually save that because it's just a Word document, so it doesn't automatically save like Report Writer. So if you just save that to your desktop, just under a client file, and then just manually upload it to Documents in Office Web, and we'll show you how to do that in a few minutes. Now, just to give you a breakdown of the Report Writer, as you can see, it's a lot more in-depth than that shortened version. But if this is the report that you need to complete, I'm sure you're probably all aware of how you complete the suitability report through Workbench. So on the top right-hand corner, you've got the document map, and everything in bold does need to be amended to some extent. Once you've completed it, it will basically it'll just go back to normal text, and that'll show that it's been completed. It just gives you quite a few areas that you can free type in there. Again, the advantages and disadvantages. So everything that you've covered off in the shortened letter will be in here as well. If you want to export this to Word, again, just to save it manually and amend it in your own time, you would just click on this icon here, which just exports it to Word for you. And then it'll just show up in a Word document, and you can just save it as normal. So again, you would just manually amend that to be appropriate for your client. Now, just moving on to which documents are mandatory for Office Web. So with all Bed and ISA cases, you need to upload the most recent platform valuation showing current holdings, and this is obviously evidence of where the source of money is coming from. You need a previous ATR profiler, either for PS or intrinsic, on the system. So if it is a PS profiler, you would just manually save that and upload it. And you might have completed an intrinsic report, say, in the last tax year, so again, you would just upload that. You would need to add some fact sheets for the existing plan and the new recommendation if you've changed that, so if you've recommended a new fund, and fund research for any new recommendations if it's whole of market. And all tax calculations, regardless, like I said, of whether or not a tax liability has arose, you would still need to have that on the system so that when compliance check the case, they can just make sure that there's definitely no CGT. A copy of the application should be included, whichever suitability report is relevant, whether it's the full letter or the shortened letter, and also a copy of the previous fact find if it's from an old TP system. You would be able to download that in the form of a PDF document, and you should be able to just save that to your desktop. So we would prefer it if you can upload a copy of the fact find if this was originally done on the TP system. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just show you how to find these documents in the extranet. Okay, so if you can just see my screen okay there, you'll just be on the intrinsic homepage on the extranet. Now, the way that you can get into the intrinsic homepage is either going through intrinsic directly through the website, or you can get onto this through the gateway section. So on the left-hand side, if you just go down to Resource Centre, click on Resource Centre, that will then take you across into the intrinsic extranet homepage. Now, all of the information that we've covered off with you today is saved on the Document Store. So if you just scroll down to the left-hand side and just click on Document Store. And then again, it's about halfway down the page. So if you just scroll down a bit further and you want to be on Advice, Quality, Guidance, and Investment Replacements. So this gives you all of the information you need, and the guidance that I've just took you through there. What assumptions would apply if you want to do the shortened suitability report? Access to the template suitability letter. So this is the shortened letter that I showed you before, which is 4 pages. So you would just complete this and manually save it and amend any of the areas in red. And you've also got the CGT calculator. So you've got a paper copy and also an Excel calculator. And this is the one that we'd require you to upload to Documents. So again, if you just save this with all of the relevant information, manually save it, like say to your desktop if you've got like a client file set up on there, and then just go into Office Web and upload that through Documents. Now you've also got a paper version of the CGT calculator if it's something you want to complete when you're with the client, but that's all of the information that you need for the Bed and ISA. If you want to search for that another way, you can just go into the site search section on the top right hand corner and type in Bed and ISA. See if that's going to work. And then that will bring up again the suitability report and the assumptions and the guidance that we've gone through today. Okay, so I hope that you found that useful. What we're now going to go through is the Office Web section, just to show you how to upload the documents, how to set the remuneration, and which remuneration applies to whether it's a client paying the fee or if it's the provider paying the fee. So I'm just going to pass you over to Andrea to go through that. So if you just bear with me for a second. Hello everybody, so it's Andrea White here, Samantha's colleague from the Advisor Support Team. So Samantha's asked me to come on and sort of explain the Office Web, the shortened process for you, how to upload your documentation, adding a manual sales process, and also setting your fee correctly. So hopefully you can all see the Office Web screen in front of you now. So what we need to do initially is to search for the client to be able to create the new client. So even if the client's not already on the system, you need to pop their details in the search criteria here. We're going to pop in a test today and hit search, and you'll see that it will bring up any clients with the same name. Once you've done that, you'll be able to see on the left-hand side that the new client button is highlighted in white for us to select. So we can now select this option, and this client will be a private client, so we just leave that as private and click on OK. And again, just fill in any details that are mandatory. And you simply need to move through the tabs at the top of the page. And as there's no mandatory fields here, we're going to click on the final tab, which is Admin Details. And it will ask you for the status of the client, which we're going to select as current, and how the ID verification has been stored. So we're going to select the electronic ID process for this client as we've completed the UIU process. Now that the mandatory fields are complete, we can click on Save. And this has created the client in Office Web for us. And this will automatically bring you through to the Sales Processes tab on the left-hand side. And as you can see at the moment, we don't have any sales processes for this particular client. So what we need to do is click on the manual SP box, the bottom left-hand corner here, and create the manual sales process. And all the fields that are highlighted in yellow, which are mandatory, are already complete, so we don't need to complete anything further. So we can simply hit the Save button at the bottom. And we can see that's now generated a manual sales process for us with today's date. And as you can see, the final column, it's noted as manual. So we'll always know that that process is being created manually. If you do have any problems for any particular reason you need to cancel the sales process, you can always select MPW in the bottom right-hand corner. So we're going to move on to the document section now for this client. And you simply click on the Documents tab, and as you'll see, it's created a sales process folder for today's date for the manual sales process that we've just completed. So this is the area where you'll upload all of your documentation for the client, and you simply click on the Add icon at the bottom of the screen and browse your local files to find the relevant documentation that you need. This is where you upload your client's ATR, your suitability letter, and any further documentation as Samantha outlined earlier in the presentation. So you'd find the relevant document, click on Open, and it will simply generate the file name here. And once you're ready, you can click on Upload. You can upload any document type to Office Web. It doesn't have to be a PDF file. It can be a Word document, a PowerPoint presentation, your Excel spreadsheet. Any file will be accepted. You can also upload zip files to Office Web as well. So when you're ready, we click on Upload, and you'll be presented with a status bar, and it'll tell you how far along the process it is. Once the file's been uploaded, you'll then get a completion dialog box appearing in front of you. Okay, I'm going to leave this blank for the time being, as this is just a test system and it's a dummy client. And we're going to move on to the fee section. So there's two different ways to enter a fee depending on where the fee is coming from. So we've either got a client paying fee, so if the client is paying you directly for the initial sort of one-off advice, or alternatively if the provider is paying you a product facilitated charge, there is a different way to add that to the system. So I'm going to look at both options for you. First of all, I'll show you how to add the client paying fee. So if the client is paying you just a one-off fee, you can simply select the Fees button on the left-hand side here. And once you've selected that, you'll see there's a new icon available which says New Fee. So you simply click on that option, and it'll bring you through to the usual fee template that you've probably seen before. So again, you need to enter any information that's highlighted in yellow, and you always need to pop the invoice date as today's date. It won't let you backdate that. And we're going to select the reason for fee as a recommendation initial. And the advice area will be investments. And we'll say that the fee amount is going to be £300. The VAT will be VAT exempt. And again, if you move on to the right-hand side, the type of service will be initial one-off. The advice will say we are independent, and the charge structure will be a fixed amount. And it's important for this box, the drop-down that mentions, is the client contact paying? So if the client is paying, you must always select yes here, okay? And once we're happy we've completed all the mandatory fields, we can simply select the Save button in the bottom left-hand corner. Okay. And as we can see, that's popped the fee there into the fee section for us. Okay. If we do want to review that, we can simply click on the fee, and it'll bring us up with a template that we've input. Okay. I'm just going to cancel out this. So that's how you would enter the client paying fee. Alternatively, if you are receiving a fee from the provider as part of the recommendation, it is a slightly different process. What you will need to do is click on the Quotes List tab on the left-hand side. We do need to add a manual quote to be able to create a policy for this particular client. Okay, so there won't be a quote in there at the moment because we haven't completed the Work French sales process. So what we'll need to do is click on Add Manual at the bottom. We need to enter in the policy information. Again, anything in yellow is mandatory. And the frequency we'll put as single. And you'll see the remuneration section at the bottom here. So you will select advisor charging if you're receiving a fee. And the type of service we'll say is going to just be the initial. If you were receiving ongoing as well, you would select both. Okay, we're just going to select initial for this particular client. And as you can see, the boxes here become available to select an option. So you click on charge structure, which will be a fixed amount, as we've taken a percentage of the fund value, sorry, the current value. And the amount we're going to say as 1%. The frequency will be single, as it's just a one-off initial. And once we're happy that all the mandatory fields are complete, we can click on Save at the bottom. Okay, so that's generated a quote for us. Now what we need to do is highlight the quote and scroll to the bottom of the page, and now we can see we've got a set remuneration icon here. Click on set remuneration, and it'll pull through the information that we've already input into the quote. Again, anything in yellow is mandatory, and we simply move through the tabs and make sure all the information is complete. Replacement contract will be yes. The sales process type is manual, as we've created the sales process manually in Officeweb. The advice provided will be face-to-face, and we'll just pop in today's date for the documentation. We can move on to the remuneration section. And as we want to enter a fee, we need to click on the Fees tab. And as you can see, we've got a button for adding the initial one-off. So if we click on this option, again, it's pulled through the values that we've already entered when we were entering the quote manually. So as we're happy that everything here is correct, we can click on Save. And you will see a dialog box that pops up, and it's basically just telling us that we're going to create a fee that's linked to the policy, which is absolutely fine. That's what we want. Okay, so we're just going to click on OK. And again, you'll just be brought through to the usual fee template, and we'll just pop in the relevant details. Again, you will need to put in today's date as the invoice date, as it doesn't let you backdate that. And the reason for fee is the recommendation for the initial. The advice area will be investment. VAT will be VAT exempt. And again, we'll pop in that we're independent advisors. And the current value has already been populated for us, which is correct, and that was a 1% value. And as you can see, the client contact paying will be set as no, as the provider will be paying this fee. Okay, so it needs to be set as no. Once we're happy that everything's complete, we can just click on Save. And as you can see, the fee template there has been input, matching up to this particular quote. Okay. So when we're ready, we can click on Save, and that's now generated the policy. And if we click on the policy detail, you can then go back to the fee and check the fee that you've set. If you were receiving an ongoing as well, you would simply click on the Add Ongoing template at the bottom and add that in too. Okay, so this is only if you're receiving the fee from the provider. If you're receiving the fee directly from the client, you simply need to click on the Fees tab and add the fee there. Okay, so I hope you've all found that useful. This process can be followed for top-ups as well, so it's the same process. You would simply add a manual sales process, add your documentation in the usual way, and the fee system is exactly the same. So if you're receiving a client fee, you click on the Fees tab. If you're receiving a provider fee, you need to add the manual quote. Okay. So that's the end of the webinar session today and the presentation. I hope you've all found that useful. If anybody has got any questions, myself and Samantha will be picking those up for you shortly. Thanks, everyone.